following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana, and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. Yes, I changed the opener for our 50th episode. Yes, this is the 50th episode of It's Not Therapy, which is apparently a big deal in terms of show milestones, and the show has evolved in 50 episodes. Well, my understanding of the show has evolved. I've discovered that you listeners out there don't like the practical advice for everyday problems angle. You want the big stories that you can see yourselves in, which sort of makes sense because I say be the hero of your own story and not anybody else's. But, epiphany, the episode I did on borderline personality disorder was the most popular episode to date. The Bubbleheads episodes, where my Bubblehead facilitators shared their personal experiences, all of those were well received as well. The episodes on trauma, anxiety, depression, you like those. I listened to the fact that you like those. Top 10 phrase, listen twice before you talk once. So, this week we're doing it again. I've got a very special person here to talk to me, Sherry Garner. Sherry's cabaret show, I Am Enough, is performing one night only, June 23rd in Hamilton. And it touches on her own experience as a woman with a bipolar 2 diagnosis who is also a mom to 2 daughters, one of whom has Down syndrome. And Sherry's story is great. You're going to love her. If you have any questions, want to leave a comment or make a suggestion, obviously I listen. NotTherapyShow.com. Go to NotTherapyShow.com or join the mailing list at NotTherapyShow.com for all updates. They don't come out too often, only when we got something to update. You can also go to Not Therapy Show on Twitter and Instagram to see additional content. Now, getting back to the fact that the audience understood what this show should be better than I did, this makes sense to me. Why? Because I don't see the difference between a show on borderline personality disorder and everyday problems. For someone with BPD, the BPD is an everyday problem. Diagnosed conditions are everyday life, and everyone has something. I was talking to a client earlier, and he said something was a distinction without a difference. I said, it's more like a difference without a distinction. What did I mean by that? That wasn't just me being pithy. Yeah, I see differences in certain things, but a lot of the differences I don't see as terribly important. And that's because I don't really do normal. People don't come to me to learn to be normal. People come to me because I learned how to be happy. And a lot of normal people aren't happy because happiness requires us to feel accepted as ourselves, which means unique individuals. And that means letting our freak fly, at least in moderation. I was hanging out with my friend Asher from the BPD show on the weekend. His husband had brought Asher and I to meet some new people he was looking to do music with. Marriages, the husband, not Asher. Anyway, within a few minutes, I said something about working in mental health. It spiked this whole conversation, and Asher was talking totally casually about having BPD and meeting his husband when he was dressed in half a fursuit. For people who don't know, a fursuit is an animal mascot costume. Now, me being me, I spoke before thinking and said, I'm hesitant to ask which half. Was it Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck? And the room thought this was hilarious. The answer, by the way, was Mickey Mouse. The bottom, not the top. Which I should have realized because top, no bottom, Donald Duck would likely have gotten Asher arrested. But I try to avoid assumptions. Instead, I accidentally told a dude running around with no pants joke about my friend's husband in a group of people I'd never met before, which is peak me. Very weak filter. Things went well, thank God. And afterward, I asked Mary Jess, Dasher's husband, when he'd done the concert for this group. He said, oh, it's not booked yet. It's like a jaw drop. You invited your nut bar friend to talk to them before you got the gig? I was referring to myself. He said, if they didn't like you, it wasn't going to work out. That is authenticity right there. Being prepared to be rejected for being open about who you are and the things and people that matter to you. Because the rejection is better than hiding, since the rejection doesn't last as long. The fear of being rejected can last a lifetime. So avoiding rejection is bad happy math. Yes, I know cultural norms are designed to influence behavior via social acceptability. But I wouldn't be here talking to you right now if I was just some basic Becky. The more people I work with, the more I realize that normal is structurally the complete antithesis of happy. Happiness is based on feeling validated as an individual, and normal, by definition, lacks individuality. So normal. That's the theme of this episode. Yes, we have to bleep the theme of this episode for radio. Awesome sauce. Less cool interviewers than me would get a guest like Sherry Garner and think, oh, how do I tell her story of bravery without making it all about her diagnosis and her daughter with Down syndrome? But I don't see it that way, because for me, a diagnosis and a daughter with Down syndrome is no different than a marketing job and a daughter who really, really loves ballet. I assume there's more to her than just that. But some of you are probably stuck thinking, what's bipolar 2? What's bipolar 1 even? Fair. Bipolar disorder. I'm just going to say bipolar because I don't like the term disorder. That's for doctors, not for the not normal. Bipolar is the condition that used to be called manic depression. If you have 4 or more manic or depressive episodes a year, that's considered rapid cycling bipolar. About 3% of the North American population is bipolar. I'm assuming it's similar to Europe. Globally, it's 1%. So if you know 100 people, you probably know someone who is bipolar. Now, bipolar 1 is the classic bipolar profile, where someone cycles through periods of mania and periods of severe depression. Mania is not what the technical description suggests. The technical description is elevated mood. But mania is actually emotional overdrive. It's a revved up state that impairs decision making, causes irritability, results in risky behaviors, and sometimes even psychosis. It's not actually feeling good. It's more like flying high followed by a crash. Now, in order to diagnose bipolar 1, there has to be at least one manic episode. Bipolar 2 is a cycle of depressive and hypomanic episodes. Hypo is exactly below manic or low manic, like hypothermia, hypomanic. That's where mood gets overactive. People are cranked, then depressed. But there's no official mania in that. There's no psychosis. Now, this is really reductive. I'm trying to do this quick. In bipolar 2, the depressions can be deeper and last longer, but not necessarily. The big difference is that lack of a full-blown manic episode. at least one hypomanic episode and one major depressive episode are required for a bipolar 2 diagnosis. And again, obviously the diagnosis is more complicated than that, and that's why it's left to professionals, therapists. I'm not a therapist. There's also a condition called cyclothymia that's a more mild form of bipolar, hypomanias and less serious depressive episodes. Now, more mild doesn't mean it can't impact your life. So even cyclothymia exists on the bipolar spectrum and should be diagnosed and a treatment plan designed. In case you're interested, there is evidence that bipolar has a genetic component. And this is where scientific message gets messy because it's considered one of the stronger genetic components in mental health. But strong in this case means that in identical twins, if one twin has bipolar, there's a 40% chance that the other twin will also have bipolar. This drops to 5% in the case of fraternal twins. Now, that doesn't sound like much. But if you have a parent, full sibling, or child with bipolar, close family, your risk of also having bipolar is 10 times that of the general population. Now, considering the general risk is 3%, it goes up to 1 in 3. Almost, not quite. If you're concerned, get it checked out. It's better to know these things. Bipolar often appears in people who have another condition like major depressive disorder. And again, there's no blood test or imaging to determine whether someone is bipolar or any other mental health condition. These are terms describing collections of symptoms that suggest a course of treatment that's more likely to succeed. Now, there are a lot of people with bipolar in the arts and adjacent to the arts because the manic and hypomanic episodes seem creative. But you also get the restlessness, irritability, racing thoughts, and a potentially dangerous sense of grandiosity or invincibility. Kanye West has bipolar. That gives you a sense of what can happen when someone is not managing this condition. But can you manage bipolar? Can you live with it? Yeah. Can you be happy with bipolar? Absolutely. But central to this is accepting that it's your everyday reality and live accordingly. Some days are going to be up. Some are going to be really down. And you can't schedule which days you get when. But that's just a heightened version of the reality for most people. The things you have to do when you have bipolar and PTS and borderline personality disorder and all that stuff, you gotta take care of yourself to minimize getting dysregulated. You gotta take your meds if you prescribe them, and you do what's best for you. That's good advice for everybody, right? That's why sharing the stories of people with greater than average challenges can make certain things click for other people who are fumbling through without a diagnosis. My ultimate goal is to give people what they need to make changes so that small problems, relatively small problems, don't become big mistakes. Which is why I say, don't let problems that aren't your fault lead to mistakes that are. Now, problems seem bigger when you're going through them alone. And that's why shows like Sherry's are so cool to me. Because people tend to go out of those going, well, if she can stand up there and be herself and talk about her story and talk about her struggles and be seen, maybe so can I. Which is why I'm so glad Sherry is going to share her time and experiences with us after the break. Now, if anything inspires a question, comment, or suggestion after the break or now, email me, Liana at Not Therapy Show. Go to nottherapyshow.com, join our mailing list there. or check out Not Therapy Show on Twitter and Instagram for additional content. We'll be back with Sherry Garner's one-woman show, I Am Enough, after this break. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I am Liana Kersner. I am not a therapist. And we're still talking about why I'm not a fan of normal. Because happiness is about feeling validated as an individual, and there is nothing individual about normal. And I am super stoked to have Sherry Garner with me. Sherry is doing a one-woman show November. Sherry, when's the show coming up? It's in June.
June 23rd.
Yeah, June 23rd. I am on the wrong page. June 23rd. It's called I Am Enough. It's Sherry's story, right? It's your story that you're performing, and there's an amazing story behind it. So I'll let you set it up. What is I Am Enough?
Oh, thank you. Well, so I Am Enough is a cabaret. It started out as a cabaret that I created for my 50th birthday, and which was last November, which is why you probably got that mixed up. So I was coming out of this really dark period and then came to a place where I've grown. I'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder 2. And so out of my triumphant opportunities, I just decided I need to do something that shows I've come back. I'm doing better. So for my 50th birthday, I thought, that's it. I'm doing a concert. I've got to get back on that stage and sing. So I created this show, and it tells the story of me as a performer, a farm kid growing up on a farm, dreaming of being a stage actor. And I went ahead and became a pretty successful stage performer, if you can say that in Canada. But I worked across, right? I know I worked in theaters across the country. I had my dream career, and I went on to have children, and I had a child with Down syndrome. And all this time, while I was going through my life with my husband and my child with Down syndrome and my other children, and we'll get into all of the story after that. But all this time I had bipolar disorder. And so this show is an opportunity for me to get back on the stage. And that's what I did. I did the show again. And out of that opportunity to create the show came this amazing swell of feedback to have people say, look, can we do it again? We want to see this show again. We want to see you up on the stage. We want to see it again. So now we're doing it again, and we're back at the Westdale Theater, and this time with a bit of a different format.
Yeah, you're doing like a round table after the show.
Correct? That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Because I don't know if you hear this, but one of the frustrations that I have is, I mean, I love my stories of lived experience. I wanted to be that thriving story of lived experience, and I'm really proud after all this hard work to be there. But at the same time, I was always really frustrated when I saw these amazing stories. I didn't know how to get from where I was to where they were. And so there was no real link to that. And I thought it's so great to go and see a story of somebody standing up there and saying, yay, this is great. This is what I lived through. Now I'm not. But I want to give people a tangible answers when they walk out the door. This is about starting a conversation, and I want to be part of the conversation. So that's what we're doing. We're opening up the second half of the show. We're going to do the cabaret, and then the second half of the show will be what I'm calling a coffee talk, and we'll open up the panel to a panel of experts and other people with lived experience, so the audience can get involved in the rest of the conversation.
Yeah. And that's what I loved about your approach here, because it's very similar to my own story. You know, I had, it wasn't bipolar, it was PTS, but it was that, how do I get from here to there? Experts are very good, like doctors are very good at pointing out where you need to get to, but how to get there is so different for every person, and no two people can do it in the same way. And I like that you say you're starting a conversation. The flip side of that, from my experience, is you are opening yourself up. It is very tender. And yes, you've been a performer all your life, but there are still certain things where this isn't a performance. This is you. And you're opening yourself up to the judgment of the crowd. How do you handle that?
Oh, good question. It really is. I think there was a click that happened with me when my director and a dramaturg, we were talking about the show, um and we it's the reason why. Why are we doing it? Why am I doing it? Am I doing it just to stand up and perform, or am I doing it to help other people? And when a nurse and a paramedic, they get up, they there's something about what happens when you're working in crisis, or you're working in a situation like that that's open. I think there's part of you that, I don't want to say it doesn't turn off, but my job is to be safe. It's always to be someone who can tell a story in a safe way. Those are my skills as an actor. That's what we do. We get into parts that are tender. But you're right. When it's my own story, that's really tough. And the big piece is that, believe it or not, I have a script.
Well,
I
yeah.
I have to work from a script. Some people say, well, it's your story. You can just go off script. It's like,
No.
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 In fact, it's even harder. I make sure that I'm on the script, so that I'm saying exactly what I mean to say, so that I can can ride that.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you my soul. I'm going to give this to you, but I'm going to do it in a safe way.
Yeah, you need the script, because when you get to the avoidant parts, you don't want
Mhm.
the, like, oh, I'm going to tangent all the way over here because I really don't want to go there. That's exactly where you need the script, right?
Exactly.
It's especially, it's not just you, it's your kids. And I can imagine, and
Mhm.
I'm not telling you your experience, I'm just offering something so you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. It's one thing to talk about what you went through, but I imagine with your kids, there's an even greater protective instinct. How did you handle that? Especially, I mean, I shouldn't say especially with a kid with Down syndrome, because they're no more or less valid or than the
Mhm.
other kid who gets branded the other kid. So that
Yeah.
alone, like, you could have done 50 minutes on that alone.
And I still may.
Yeah,
Yes.
like, how did you handle the fact that these are your babies? They're probably 25 now, but they're still your babies, right? How did you handle that?
Well, in fact, they're 15 and 16. And
Okay.
it so they are so, but yeah, right. It's very true. How did I handle? It's a really good question. I My kids and I, we're always really open with everything. And I think that going back to staying on the script is one big thing when I'm
Mhm.
talking about that. But the other part of it is that I've always led from, there's a song in my show called Children Will Listen. And basically, I've always lead from a place of, do what, you are the example for your children. So if I'm standing up there humbly explaining who I am, explain humbly sharing myself, then it helps them humbly share themselves. And it's really, you're right, the story around Maggie and sharing my, like it's true. Maggie has Down syndrome, and I stand up there and I say this, and I'll say this to others. When I found out she had Down syndrome, I was devastated. It's not what we wanted for her. It's not. No one says, "Oh, I hope I have a child with a difference that's going to cause them pain in the world,"
Mhm.
because the world is built for only one. It's so built
Mhm.
such a limited sphere. So no. So I just felt that, and I try to teach my kids that, be brave, tell your story, be
Mhm.
brave. My final song is "Brave" by Sarah Bareilles. Say what you
Oh,
want to
nice.
say. I want to hear you be brave, and I think that I just try to live by the example for them. But it's true. It's walking a fine line, and it's constantly going through the script, and constantly just asking myself, yes, you need to share your visceral story, because that's what people connect to, and that's what I connected to. But how do you do it in a way that still protects your children and protects yourself? And it's, I think the songs help me do that.
Okay. Yeah, because the mom guilt is real, right? That it's like, oh, there's so much pressure. There's a unique thing that happens with the role of mother. And did your daughters get veto power on anything? Like, how did you navigate that? How did you know where to go and where to not go? Because this is highly subjective territory, right? Nobody's got this figured out.
No. And I guess it's kind of like we approach it like this, my director and I, what is my feeling within the situation? What is my, it always goes back to the I statement. I am, right? Do you know what I'm saying?
The I want.
The I am statement, I want. It's going back to, what is my experience, rather than bringing into assuming what their experiences were. And there was, so with my 16-year-old, I did say to her, look, this is where mom's going down. This is the road I'm going down. She was front and center the first time I did it. And I said, this is where I'm going. If at any, read the script, if there's anything you're uncomfortable with. But she's now grown up with a mom who's an advocate. And I've been an advocate for mental health, but I was also a fierce advocate for Down syndrome and for children with people living with Down syndrome before that. And so she's grown up with the mama who's an advocate, the bug, but we do protect. I do weigh in with her. Now, Maggie, the other hand, my 14-year-old with Down syndrome, she's in the show. She loves it. She's got the show bug. She's amazing. I wanted to really show people the range from, look, yes, you can say it out loud that this isn't what I wanted. But at the same time, then this, and I do describe in the show too, what that pro-choice feels like, what it really feels like to actually have to choose whether or not you're potentially terminating your child or not, because it could have been something. When we found out her diagnosis, I found out at 12-week gestation.
Okay.
And so when we found out her diagnosis, we were given several options. First, we were offered to just do nothing. And then we were offered several tests that were dangerous, potentially dangerous. And then we were offered just termination. So, right. So you're given this you're in this choice, whether you have to make a choice at this point. So it's one of those life situations that, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's
like
more
you said, it's a choice. And so the kid knows she was wanted.
She was wanted.
Yep.
She was wanted. And in that, I chose her no matter what, and so then you get to see what it's like to be a person with lived experience with Down syndrome, because that is something that I've been championing for years. And honestly, she gives me so much inspiration, because this is a person who lives in the world looking very different from other people, with a cognitive ability that's very different, being treated very differently. And, you can advocate as all you want, but she goes out of she's gone when she leaves the house. But to have then had my own diagnosis, to suddenly be on the inside of being different, was really
you were
different.
diagnosed after Maggie was born?
Oh, yes. I was only diagnosed 4 years ago.
Whew. Okay, well, that sounds like another chapter for this discussion. Sherry, hold on. Sherry Garner, I Am Enough. It's a cabaret show. Coffee Talk Theater Productions presents Friday, June 23rd at 7 p.m. at the Westdale in Hamilton. You can get tickets at thewestdale.ca, but hang on after the break. More with Sherry Garner's one-woman show about her very singular life after this on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I am Liana Kersner. I am not a therapist. We're still in the interview talking to Sherry Garner. Sherry has a show, a cabaret, starring herself at the Westdale in Hamilton, Friday, June 23rd at 7 p.m. And it is about her life with two daughters as a mom. One of the daughters, Maggie, has Down syndrome. But before the break, we were getting to the fact that Sherry was actually diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2 after she had her daughter with Down syndrome. She was only diagnosed a few years ago. Oh, so you've been living with this probably since you were a teenager, the bipolar 2.
That's right.
Okay.
They thought maybe it was right.
Yeah. That's very common. But I mean, I joked before we started, you've been an entertainer all your life. How could you tell with the ups and downs? But let's get serious about that because, I mean, okay, we both know what the industry's like. A lot of bad behavior is hand waved away. Some people are not treated fairly and they are punished unfairly. How do you figure out something's not right in that soup?
Oh, it's the $1 million question. You know, I have a friend who is 40, he's 51 this year, and he's just been diagnosed with ADHD, and he's going through the rage phase. The phase, anyway, where I would go, how do I do it in that soup? You're exactly right. I think the soup, the entertainer in me is what, in some ways, what saved me because I got to ride that almost bipolar wave. Well, it was a bipolar wave, and I just thought it was normal. You know, we go off and a show alone, you ride an amazing array of emotions. And I just thought what I was going through was normal because my life wasn't normal. So what happened was, the highs were getting so high and the mania was getting so out of control, the energy level, the mania buzz that I would get, it was getting so out of control. They thought I had ADHD.
Okay.
So I would manage it like ADHD. But what ended up happening and how we discerned it out of the soup was basically time. And basically it was times when I should have been positive. I should have been thinking, everything in the situational world is going well.
Okay.
But I'm still very depressed. I'm still really depressed. What is going on? Why am I? We started to pull it apart. And then the other thing that came out for me, which was I started having hallucinations.
Okay.
And that came on with the children later on when I started having children. I started having hallucinations and real ideations of ideations of suicidal ideations swinging from it just got too really high.
Okay. So were you put on ADHD medications?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I know that's a dicey question, but that's the challenge of mental health diagnoses, right? You give ADHD meds to somebody with bipolar, you can enhance the manias.
And that's what happened.
That explains. Okay. Yeah.
So that's exactly what ended up happening in 2019 was that, and it's so hard. It's so hard for doctors and psychiatrists. And I know this now, having the way it all presents in a woman my age and it presented with me. I mean, I was highly functioning.
Yeah.
My mania is how I created my shows. And I know that sounds, but I always say it's funny. It's like, it's sometimes your superpower being able to feel so deeply, but it's also, it's something that you need to learn to, I don't say harness or learn to understand that it's not, I didn't want to be Sylvia Plath, like I said that to my psychiatrist, please, I don't want to be Van Gogh. How do I do this?
Right. Right. Yeah, because if it's not treated, it does get worse. I mean, Sylvia Plath, for those people who don't know, Sylvia Plath wrote
Yeah,
a book
sorry.
called The Bell Jar based on her own experience. Was it in the 60s? I think so.
Mm-hmm,
But I mean,
mm-hmm.
she did she die by suicide or
She did. She
yes.
did.
So, I mean, that unfortunately became the poster girl for women in mental health, and it was such a double-edged sword, right?
So true.
Yeah,
It
because
was
we were like,
such a
oh
double-edged
God,
sword.
yeah. So
And it was so true. Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say what my psychiatrist, and I want to say this. So he said, but remember those people who you may be fearful of becoming, they didn't have the supports we have today. They just
Mm.
didn't. So,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those second wave feminists had profound mental illness. I mean, Shmulek Firestone, Andrea Dworkin, and there's definitely a correlation, right?
definitely.
And how do you handle that as a performer? Because obviously anything that risks taking away that edge or that energy is probably not something you enter into lightly. So
Mhm.
do you manage how do you manage navigating the system? Because you don't want to be normal
No,
and
I
yeah,
don't.
and
I remember
functional.
praying to God
Yeah.
saying, please don't make me be normal.
Yeah.
Um,
And but you wanted to be enough based on the name of the show.
mm, it's right. It's
So
right. And
yeah.
yeah, it's such a really good question. I remember when I first went on medications, it was a long discussion with my doctor because he's sort of my GP at the time. He said, sort of offered me the same, um, it's the same thing. And I remember just saying, it's not worth it. The pain is
Mm,
not worth it. This is not worth, I need to do something. And so it got so bad that I had to do something. I think that's what it came down to. But one of the great things, and one of the things that I had to really work hard, and it's taken a long time, and to truthfully, is to find the right mix of medications for me
mm-hmm.
and not let go and not be complacent, and to really be self-aware. And also the biggest thing I think for me is I had to really lean into my friends and people around me who knew me, who could
Mm-hmm.
then say, yeah, you're still off, there's something not quite there. And between us we could then find the right mix and then go from there. But the other part of creativity is, it's I really believe creativity is a discipline, just like every other practice.
Mm-hmm.
And just like we practice meditation and we practice all the other things, my creativity, I sit down and practice, and that is helps me feel more confident in myself. It helps me feel more connected to myself and what's going on, so that I can have a great baseline now. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So what is enough, the concept of enough for you to land on kind of an existential question?
Yeah, that's a good one. Um, it changes moment to moment.
Okay.
Sometimes and I think that's what it was. So I am enough to be able to stand up here and tell my story. If I'm enough, you're enough. If I'm enough to be able to go and get up this morning and make my bed, and that's enough, and that's what I'm going to accept today, because that's my falling forward step today, then that's enough. And I'm enough, and I'm standing up here saying, hey, I'm flawed. I'm full of I take 6 medications to just be able to get up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I am somebody who has to and that's enough. I'm enough. But I hope that is making sense. It just encapsulates everything that I want to remind myself in a moment to moment basis, when I'm beating myself up, when the voices of self-loathing are there, and when I'm just thinking, who wants to hear my story? Who's going to want to hear me sing? I still say that every minute. Who's going to want to hear me sing? This is ridiculous. But they do.
Amazing. Sherry Garner, I am enough. Cabaret, Friday, June 23rd at 7:30 p.m. You can get tickets. I've got the link, thewestdale.ca. That's the theater it's at. Is it part of Arts Fest, Sherry?
It's part of Arts Fest.
Yeah,
it is.
Arts Fest. So it's June 23rd at 7:30. Tickets are, I believe, $25.
That's right.
Right. All right.
25.
So if you're in the Hamilton area, Mississauga's not that far from Hamilton. So if you're in the Hamilton area, check it out. Sherry, thanks so much. And all the congratulations on this achievement. It's phenomenal.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Check out Sherry's show. If you miss the information, I will share it on Twitter and Instagram. It's there right now. So go to @NotTherapyShow on Twitter and Instagram for the details. We're going to be back after this for my final thoughts on Forgetting Normal in that CeeLo Green song, Forget. I'll be back. Don't forget me during this break. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We got one more segment to go. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist, and we're still talking normal, or in the CeeLo Green song censored version, Forget Normal. Ooh, 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 ooh. Yeah. So in the closing minutes of the show, I want to talk about another moment where I was really proud of a client and actually said something smart. Kind of. I'm frequently proud of my clients. They are battling through some legitimately tough stuff. And they're doing it. They're doing the work. They're getting the progress. And sometimes it's hard to see. And a lot of the time I feel like my job is just pointing out how awesome they are until they start believing it, because they are legitimately awesome. And I have to be careful about this next story because I have to avoid identifying details. But it was a client who's asked me to avoid identifying details, talking about opening up in group therapy, managing to do it, and still feels restless, can't sit still during group. And I asked if, because, was it anxiety or was it something else? I won't say what it is because it was a very me moment and that's an identifiable detail. And he said he wasn't sure. He's anxious when he's there, but it gets too clinical for him. And the jargon sets him off. He said he feels like the jargon is a way of them trying to convince themselves of what they're saying. And he prefers to speak in metaphors. I will not say the specifics of the metaphor. Again, identifiable details. But he did say that when he goes off on the metaphors, some of them look at him funny. And I said, when people look at me funny, that's when I know I'm doing it right. See the story off the top. And he said, so if people look at me funny, I'm right? I must be right a lot. Yeah. And I said something that, looking back, it's like, okay, that's a good one. I'm going to share this because I said anything that shakes the trees is worthy of a story. And he said, very true. And that is something, like I said, I wanted to share, because the shaking the trees metaphor is that, scary stuff in life. The parts of our brains that go, don't go into the dangerous thing. It's an adaptive behavior, right? If the bush shakes and you run away and a little bunny hops out, well, you live to tell the embarrassing story. But if the bushes rustle and you don't run away and it's a saber-toothed tiger that comes out and eats you, well, your lunch, former caveman or woman or person. And that's sort of the point. We construct stories about the things that bother us because it makes it easier to deal with. I like my superheroes and other forms of superheroes that aren't called superheroes but are still superheroes, like Disney princesses. I say Disney princesses are superheroes. Fight me. Ariel is just Aquaman with music. Seriously, dudes. Think about it. But anyway, we tell the stories about the things that rustle the trees because it allows us to venture further and further out of that proverbial cave. If we're trying to pass as whatever normal is this week, that is exhausting. If we aim for being authentic, as I talked about Mary Jest and his husband Asher off the top, that's easier to pull off because at least we know what it is, right? But normal is just such a mind trap because what is it? It's whatever the majority says it is at any given time. And I refuse to base my sense of self on a moving target. Top 10 phrase, healthy goals are based on things you can control. That was the key thing I learned in a year of intensive trauma therapy, is that you have to focus on what you can control. And the rest of it, it's the story you make out about the rustling trees. You can't control things outside yourself. You can tell yourself stories that maintain your equilibrium, that inner world, that sense of who you are in the grand scheme of things. And that allows you to be able to face, you know, the scary stuff that, like I said, is embarrassing, but not fatal. And that's all you can really do. One little bit at a time, one foot in front of the other. And normal just derails all of that, because that's when that default mode network in your brain starts going haywire. You start trying to figure out where you fit in the entire cosmos. It's too big. It's too big. Just give it a try. Repeat after me. Normal. You'll be happier for it. I am out of time. That is not a norm. That is a rule. So nottherapyshow.com, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Shoot me an email. Next time you hear from me, it'll be with the bubbleheads again. We're going to be talking healthy conflict on It's Not Therapy. Until then, you know it's coming. Your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. Talk next time.